Stephen Warner. Thanks for the Mary Poppins there. That was really fun. The chim 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 chimney. Welcome everyone to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. Today we present designer Kiki van Eijk, joining us from the Netherlands, specifically from the city of Eindhoven, which has emerged in the past couple of years as the capital of Dutch industrial design. And interestingly, was recently named the world's most intelligent community. I don't know if that has something to do with design or not, but there you go. Thank you to our partners for their support of today's program, the Detroit Creative Corridor Center, or DC3, and Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. I just have two newsworthy items for you today. First of all, for the design-minded, the Stamp School is hosting a make-a-thon this weekend. This is bringing students from art and design together with students from across the university to turn their ideas into physical product prototypes. There's a lot of folks already registered for this, but if you are not registered and you would like to partake, you have till 8 p.m. tonight is the deadline to register. That'll take place for 36 hours over the weekend, culminating in a design expo, which all of us, the general public, yes, is welcome to come and see on Sunday from 10:30 to 12:30 and see all of those prototypes that are created. This will take place in the Duderstadt Connector, which is the hallway between the Duderstadt and Palmer Commons on North Campus. Sunday, 10:30 a.m. to 12:30. And next week, we have a Penny Stamps special event on Tuesday. We are presenting documentary photographer Misha Friedman. This is part of our sort of triptych that started last fall with Pussy Riot and then Interuka and now Misha, who is a Moldavian by birth. He spent his childhood under Soviet rule and emigrated here in the breakup of the Soviet Union. For those of you who don't know, Moldova is a landlocked country in Eastern Europe between Romania and the Ukraine. His work addresses patriotism and corruption in Russia and the former Soviet Union. He's won numerous awards for crisis reporting. And his visit next week actually precedes an exhibition which is going to take place next spring called Photo 51, Is Corruption in Russia's DNA? This is a co-presentation with the Weiser Center for Emerging Democracies. This will take place next Tuesday, February 10th at 5:30 p.m. in the University of Michigan's Art Museum's Helmut Stern Auditorium. I think it's not to be missed. There will be a regular Q&A today following directly in the screening room. Kiki will be happy to meet you and answer your questions. So join us there. And now for a proper introduction of our guest, please welcome one of the Stamp School's latest acquisitions, designer and professor Stephanie Tharp.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Good. We didn't have to fight our way through storms today, so that's a good thing. As Christina mentioned, I'm Stephanie Tharp, and I'm happy to be here to introduce Dutch designer Kiki van Eijk. Much of design today is user-centered, market-driven, and empathic. And while these approaches are valuable, necessary, and important, like any field, design benefits from diversity in intention, process, and output. It's refreshing to see a designer like Kiki who has a unique point of view and work that is emotional, playful, and poetic. She says that she is searching for the freedom of the playing child. She embraces an intuitive process and values making things by hand. Her work has a very personal and emotional character. Her early sketches could easily have served to illustrate the imaginative stories of Mary Poppins or Alice in Wonderland. Her nostalgic approach combined with her poetic and personal style come to life in a wide range of work like carpets, lighting, furniture, ceramics, and textiles. She graduated with distinction from the prestigious Design Academy in Eindhoven, and ever since she presented her famous carpet known as Kiki's rug in 2000, she has been a rising star in design. She works for respected clients, including the well-known Dutch collective Moooi, Studio Edelkoort Paris, Bernhardt Design, the design collective Skitsch, and more. She is currently focused on her own collection that's presented in galleries, museums, and fairs in the biggest cities around the world: Milan, Venice, Beijing, London, Amsterdam, New York, and more. She's also won a number of design awards. Two of her bigger honors are the Good Design Award by the Chicago Athenaeum in 2012, and she was also nominated as Designer of the Year at Design Miami Basel in 2007. Many designers are focused on creating a better built environment, and while her work is focused on making better things in the world, through her work, she also makes the discipline of design better. Since we're talking about playfulness and Wonderland, I thought I would end with a quote from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. But Alice had got so much into the way of expecting nothing but out of the way things to happen that it seemed quite dull for life to go on in the common way. And with that, let's welcome Dutch designer Kiki van Eijk.
Hello, I'm Kiki. I'm very honored to be here, especially since I know which people have been before me. My title for this talk is The Road to Wonderland, because first of all it refers to Alice in Wonderland. When I graduated with this carpet, When I graduated with this carpet, I was often called Alice in Wonderland, because I'm sitting there as a kind of doll on a huge carpet. I'll tell you more about it later, what the inspiration for this project was. But also, this first project of mine illustrates that if you just follow your heart and intuition, you can come on the road to Wonderland. And I think that really, for everything in life, it really matters that you use your heart and not only your brains. If we would do that more, then I guess the world could become a wonderland, and if we would all work together. What I find interesting to start this talk with, is that the book Alice in Wonderland was written by Lewis Carroll. That's not his real name, as you might know. He was a mathematician teaching mathematics in Oxford University. And he made on a sunny summer day a boat with Alice and her two sisters. And they were driving in the boat, and they asked him to tell a story. And he told them a story like you often do to children. And it went on and on and on. And the children, Alice and her sisters, they asked for more and more. And that's how this whole story came up. It was just during a boat trip. And then afterwards, he decided to write it down in a book. And it became a bestseller and a worldwide known story. And I think it's really interesting to think about that. That first of all, he's teaching mathematics. You wouldn't maybe expect that he's writing such an absurdist book. And second of all, that if you just lead your intuition, you just follow it like he was doing, like he was just making up all kind of stories after and after each other, that it leads to something very wonderful, which can be a big inspiration for many people. Here you see a picture of, on the left side, of me working in my own workshop on a big clock. And it's a kind of 3D knitting with metal. I'll show you later some more details about it. And on the right-hand side, you see me as a child, as a little girl, sitting in the garden, also knitting with a children's knitting set. What I like about this picture is that already back then, I liked to tinker, and still now in my designs I'm always tinkering. I think it's a base of something very playful and something very creative. And from tinkering you can get many very nice ideas without limiting yourself in the first place. Because in the end, for me, design is all about joy. And I think that everybody has something that he's very good at. And some people know it already from themselves, other ones don't know it and still have to figure out. But I guess we're all on this world with a special intention. And some people know it during their life, sometimes will never know it, and it doesn't really matter. But everybody has something unique. And I guess if you follow your intuition and you do something you really like, you will come closer to this. And also, I think, well, in these times where, you know, Facebook and those kind of social medias are used a lot, it's more and more difficult for everybody to stay truthful to yourself and to keep everything authentic, because many people, they kind of mirror themselves with what they see at other people or what other people are doing. Other things are nicer. The grass is always greener on the other side. But I think it's very important to don't look at other people and to don't mirror yourselves, but to really listen to yourself and to see what you're good at. And in this way, if we would all do that and we work together, then we can really make things happen and change our world. Well, as you see on the picture, I was always already playing with things, making things, and I wanted to make the world around myself, which was then very small, more beautiful. But I was already back then designing my own world without knowing it myself. And this picture was the inspiration for my end exam project. I think in general, curiosity is the key to freedom and the key to openness and the key to creativity. And if we think creative and if we think broad and not restricted, I think we're able to solve many, many problems in which kind of field, not only design. I had, for my graduation, it was the first time that we had to give ourselves a project, that we didn't have a given project by the teachers. And I had about 20 different teams, which were all interesting starting points, but in fact, it doesn't really matter what you take, because you can make something very good out of anything and something very bad of anything. So in the end, it's just what you do with it. I had one of the teams was toys for grown-ups, and it was really not literally or already focused on a certain idea, but I was thinking about playing with the idea that everything around us could be a bit more playful and less static and maybe more mobile, but very open, and I had no end goal yet. When I was doing my research and I was looking at different books in the library, I found a book about dolls' houses, and specifically 19th century Victorian dolls' houses. And somehow it really fascinated me and intrigued me. I didn't know at that point why, but I had to keep looking in it. And most of my teachers, they really didn't understand what was interesting about it. But when I was talking to one of the teachers, I found out that what was so interesting is that the proportions and the scale in dolls' houses are never really right. Like this carpet, if I was calculating it and scaling it up to our world, then I found out that the yarn of which it was made had to be like 1.5 centimeters thick. And up till then, I never saw a carpet which was made that thick. The internet didn't really, I didn't really use it at that time. That was 15 years ago. So I just looked at the yellow pages and started the phone. Not even with a mobile phone, because I didn't have it back then, but just with a regular phone. And in the end, I found one company that was actually making this yarn. This one. It's different yarns twined together, and then it's felted in a bath with hot water and soap, so it looks like one thick yarn. And then I wanted to color the yarns to create a pattern because I wanted to make this typical Victorian 19th century style rose, because that was archetypical for these dolls' houses. And then I was searching for companies that could paint it. In the end, I found one, and they wanted to sponsor me as well because they were so enthusiastic about it. And then you see that also a lot of things in design are also about communication, because if you have a strong drive yourself, you're also able to show that to other people and to make people enthusiastic to help you in things. So then I designed a pattern in the computer program Illustrator, and I found my own way to make it. I made a wooden frame with a grid of chicken wire, and in the chicken wire I put all little pieces of wool as a kind of crosses, and filled the whole chicken wire frame with wool. And then in the end, I got this. And what was interesting about this, that most of my teachers didn't really see where it was going until the point where I was really making it. But until that point, they were very much in doubt about it. They didn't really know what to do with it, with me. And all the time I thought, am I crazy or what? It's just a good idea. And I thought, well, I have to do it, but I don't know what they're going to say. And in the end, when it was finished, they saw what it was. And I graduated cum laude with this project. But it's just to show you that if you really strongly believe in something yourself, although the environment around you doesn't see it, you should just do it, because you don't have anything to lose, in fact. And then you also see that if something is really authentic, it's also timeless and therefore very durable, because this carpet still didn't really lose its spirit, and it doesn't look old-fashioned yet, and it's still shown in a lot of museums in exhibitions right now. So for me, it's a good proof that if you believe in something, you should just do it. Then I'm going to read you a small quote from Alice in Wonderland. It says, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to go," said the cat. "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, sure you to do that," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." And it means with my projects, I often feel the same, as if I jump into the rabbit hole behind the rabbit without looking back how to get out. Sometimes it's even the road to an end point, to maybe one would not say wrong, but the things that go different, they often give you the best ideas. So if you don't try things, you never get further or to a further point. And the same as what I like about this quote, to where, that's what I do when I go traveling. I've traveled just, for private, not for business, a lot around the world, to many countries, backpacking. And what I like is that I don't plan beforehand where to go, only I choose the flight and I book a flight. And when I'm there, I'll see where to go and how I get there. And that's the nice thing about life in general, that there are always new things coming on your path and bringing you things. For example, here on the left side you see a boy in India, and on the right side you see a garden in Mexico. And when I'm traveling and walking around, I always like to look at places where you maybe are not allowed or you shouldn't go there, but just to peep into it and to look at it. This is in Madagascar. It's a fantastic country to visit. It's an island, and in general, what I've found out is that it seems that people on islands are more happy than people that don't live on islands. And it's not only because the weather is nice and because the sea, but I think it's because they live on their own island and they don't look so much at others. They are just happy with what they have. And what I also learned a lot with these travels is that it's really, for me at least, important to be as much as possible in the nature. Because when you're in nature, you understand where we come from and also where the world can go and what we could do about it, especially as a designer. And also what's interesting in traveling in those kind of countries where people don't have much, you can see that if you're close to nature, you learn to improvise and you always make a way. And sometimes I wonder, in the modern culture that we live in, what would happen if electricity falls down, if we don't have gas anymore, if we have no heating, if we don't have cars, what would people do? Can people still improvise to still survive? Or are we that far away from nature that we get in panic and everything collapses? As I'm very open to many things, I don't limit myself for any design direction. I just do the projects I like to do. Sometimes I'm asked to do certain projects or designs, and if I don't like it or I don't see what my added value can be, I just don't do it. I never take a project for the money. I only follow my heart. And so I also did some projects with food design. One is a coral inside a bag of clay, which I developed together with a chef cook of a Michelin star restaurant. And on the left side you see an ice cream cake for Häagen-Dazs. They ask every year an international designer to design their Christmas ice cream cake. It was really nice because it was a totally different field and I had no experience in this. But the nice thing is, if you don't have experience in something, that anything seems to be possible. And if it's not possible, you will find a way in the end. So it's nice if you kind of, without any fear, you jump into a project. Sometimes if you know already a lot about, for example, technical aspects of something, then you can also limit yourself and only think in the ways you have been thinking before already. After my graduation, I was for a few years in a row called the girl of the carpet, which was in a way nice, and on the other hand it was not nice because I didn't want to be the girl of the carpet. I wanted to show the world that I was able to do other things as well. So I was interested in ceramics, and I just phoned a ceramic company to see if they could teach me something, and I got into contact with their modeler, who's making all the models. And I've been working there for a few years, and he taught me everything about model making. Which was really good about that is that once you cross a kind of boundary for yourself, in the beginning I was a bit afraid because I didn't know a lot of this technique and also not to think in negative and positive forms. But once I'd done this, I also had no fear anymore to cast bronze or aluminium or work with any kind of material. Sometimes people ask me, like, you are so diverse, how is that possible? But it's just because the diversity is in the materials and the techniques, but there is always a kind of common thought in all my projects. And once you've done a few different techniques, it's not so difficult to try something else. So when I started to work with ceramics, the company said, well, first do something small so you get the technique and you understand how it works. So I made a series of cups, which I stitched in fabric and then casted in ceramics, and that turned out quite well. And then on the right side you see a piece of fabric, which is a part of a clock. And it became, in the end, the clock, what you see on the right side. It's a clock that I stitched out of fabric and then casted in ceramics. So it looks soft, but it is hard. And I like to play with this contradiction. This clock I just designed not for a commission of anybody, but just because I wanted to make it. And then a few years later, it was taken to the collection of Moooi. So the nice thing about how I work is that I just make the things I want to make, and then I'll see what happens with it. Some things are sold, some aren't, some are picked up, and some don't. But it doesn't matter because it's all in the process and on the big line of my work. And this soft clock, it became really a worldwide success. You can never predict which designs become a success and which not. But it's always nice when something is picked up. And I decided to make a whole series, which I call the soft series. So it's all stitched from fabric and then casted in ceramics. And I go on with that probably all my life, because every year I make something else in the series. You see a shelf, and on the right side you see a desk with ceramic drawers. And this cabinet also consists of 39 ceramic drawers, which was a big technical challenge to make it. But I found a way after 6 months of experimenting on it. And that's really nice to see that something you think of in the beginning, which is not possible, seems to be possible. Here are some more examples of this soft series. And this is one of my recent projects in this series. It's a piggy bank, a soft piggy bank. It's huge, it's about 50, 60 centimeters. And what I like about it is that often people say about design or the type of designs I make, like it's much too expensive to pay for, I can't afford it. And I always say, why can't you save for it? You don't need to buy something right now. With the consumer mentality that we have nowadays, a lot of people want to buy something right now when they see it. But I think it's much more fun to save for something you really like, and then you have the feeling that you got something really special. So I would say saving is fun. In my work, I'm using a lot of things I collect. I collect strange and weird objects, literally, but not only literally, also in my mind. Things I encounter when I'm traveling, or I find in a flea market, or whatever. This blanket is made of mohair, and it's woven in a relief, jacquard woven, and it consists of all kinds of scissors. I was very obsessed by scissors at the time. It was in 2008. I still don't know why, but I just needed to collect them. And then I made a whole series around it called Domestic Jewels. It's about, in fact, it was about the idea that in the past, like in 18th, 19th century, you had all kind of domestic tools like scissors or a grinder or whatever. They were made very beautifully, often casted out of bronze and with ornaments, and they looked very pretty, instead of the scissors that we most of the time buy nowadays, which with a plastic top and a simple stainless steel part. And then I thought, why is it that nowadays things look only practical and not nice? Because in fact, I think that if you make something look very nice, you are more careful with it, and maybe you might keep it all your life. Because a special scissor like that, I would keep it all my life. And a scissor with a plastic handle that looks terrible, well, I think you just care a little bit less about it. So that's also a message in all of my designs, that I think if you spend a lot of passion in something and a lot of love, and you take time to make things, and you make things that don't have this throwaway feeling, then in a way it's also much more durable and better for our environment, instead of furniture that already falls apart after 2 years. And also, I was speaking to a relative of mine that was guiding people around in Delft. It's a city in Holland, in a museum. And they had an inventory list of 100 years ago. and then they had written on there what a teacup and a plate would cost if you would compare it to now. And then it would cost about 60 euros, which is about, I guess, $70, $80. And people in a normal household would buy that because they would keep it all their lives. And nowadays, most of the people would say, that's much too expensive to buy a teacup of $80. So it's not that times haven't really changed, only our perception of things. But what's funny to tell also when I see this picture is that I had this, I made this blanket and I was invited by a famous photographer from Paris to do a photo shoot, which I could later present in Milan together with my works. So it's also me on the picture in black. And when we were doing the picture, she found this huge scissors of about 40 centimeters big, which was almost as big as the blown up scissors in my blanket. And that's kind of illustrating how a lot of things in my work go, that I don't plan everything beforehand. I didn't plan a styling for this picture, and I didn't plan to search for this kind of scissors, but all of a sudden it was just there in this photo studio. So I guess it's also really nice not to plan everything and just see what comes. This was in the same series, Chaise Longue, and on the other side you see some early sketches. This project was called Total Table. I was invited by 4 companies to design everything around the table. So the tablecloth, cutlery, ceramics and glassware. It was a very nice project. It was presented in, I think, 2010 in Milan. So for the glass, I worked with a Dutch glassblowing company called the Royal Leerdam Crystal. Here you see that some of you might be familiar with glass blowing. You blow the glass into a hot wooden mold. It's, I think, most of the times it's pear wood, and then they turn. And afterwards, after a lot of steam, you always get a beautiful surprise. That's the nice thing about glass blowing, that in a few minutes' time, you have a kind of wonderful present. This is a picture from the book of Alice in Wonderland. Alice has a few times in her book a golden key, which leads her to a wonderful garden. To me, it feels, when I start a new project, also as if I have a golden key to a new beautiful garden, and this garden is my new project, which feels like a journey to me. I don't like to work with set methodologies or manner. With each project I do, I try to reinvent myself and to not work on the methods I've been using before, because it's very important for me to challenge myself all the time and to not get bored of myself. This is a project which I made an installation for a traveling exhibition called The Future of Food. I made a nursery, a kind of baby room for plants, because I was thinking about the fact that a lot of people, including myself sometimes, I try not to get more and more away from how things work in nature. Like a lot of people, for example, they buy meat pre-packed in the supermarket, and they grill it and they eat it later on. And if I tell a story that I was in Madagascar, traveling on a pirogue, a dugout tree on the river for 8 days, and that there was a chicken on the boat and that it was slaughtered the second day and then we ate it, then people think it's a terrible story, but it's a very true story, and I think a good story, because the chicken had a beautiful life and it was walking for days and days in a huge field and not produced in a huge mega farm where it couldn't even walk around. So that was actually the basic thought for this idea, that if you treat nature well, it grows by itself. So, and in fact, it's very easy to compare with a baby. I planted seeds. I went to Europe's biggest seed producers for agriculture, for mainly vegetables, and I got their seeds. I put them in this bed, and I had special growing lamps above it, and I just took a lot of care about them, which was not even that difficult. I just watered them every day, and then after a few days it already came up, and after 1-2 weeks there was already cabbage to eat and other plants. So it's just showing that if you just take a bit of love and care and attention, you come a big way. This project is called Allotment. It's an installation I made for the Biennale in Venice a few years ago, together with a gallery called Venice Projects. It's based in Venice, and they work with glass blowers on the island Murano. And it was in an exhibition called Glass Stress. The person who initiated this glass stress exhibition is called Adriano Berengo, an Italian guy. And he told me that this title was about the fact that first of all, with glass, there's always stress because it can break, because you have to be really quick to change the shape in time. And on the other hand, it's because the craft of glass is, at least in Europe, and I guess around the world, everywhere, in a big stress, because it's a craft that is almost tend to fade away if we don't watch out. There are only still a few maestros. Maestro, that means the master glass blower. There are only a few maestros on the island, and not a lot of people that can follow up. So if nothing happens, then in the end the craft will die. So this guy decided to make an exhibition about it and to show it during the Biennale for a few years, to create more attention for the world of glass again. And my project is called Allotment because it's about my idea about the future of food. It has a scarecrow in the back, which is kind of protecting always the vegetables and fruits you grow. And also because it's a kind of Jesus figure and lunatic at the same time. In this installation, it consists of 7 ideas. I'm showing the different processes of growing your own food. And I really think that it would be very good for the world if more people would grow their own vegetables in an allotment. Even though you have a very small garden, I think we need green, we need leaves, and also next to that, the fact is that the things we buy in the supermarket, there is always a lot percentage that we throw away. And even that is a big pity, but maybe even worse. It creates those big trashes with food we throw away. It creates a lot of toxic, which is really bad for our environment. So how nice would it be if you just pick only the vegetables from your garden at the time you need it, and there's not a lot to throw away. At the same time, this is representing the harvest of red fruit. And at the same time, I used a lot of traditional Murano techniques in this project. Somehow I am always intrigued by houses, same as scissors. So I made a whole collection of wall hangings showing different type of houses. The left one I call holiday house, the right one I call city house, and I've got a whole range of archetypical houses. This is a project, a carpet that I designed for an Italian company called Nodus. It's a brand, and they work with different international designers. They asked me to design a carpet, and I almost immediately knew what to do. I was looking already for many months at this big truck which was demolishing all the flowers that were growing between the tiles in front of my studio. And I was thinking all the time, it's such a pity that those flowers that are just growing there randomly are taken away. So I took them and I dried them between books, like I used to do as a child. And I combined a pattern with that. And in the end, this carpet is made by hand. It takes about 18 months to knot it by hand. And it consists of only natural materials, linen, aloe vera, wool, but also banana silk. I didn't know before this project that you could make silk out of banana trees. These wall hangings are called Memories of a Panorama. It's panoramas that I have in my mind, which I see when I'm sitting in a train, looking outside, when I'm walking somewhere in the fields. I don't photograph them, but I just kind of photograph them in my mind. And I used it to create a series of wall hangings. The way I designed it was to just cut in pieces of textile and glue them on a surface. And I literally photographed that and translated that into a digital program for jacquard weaving. This project is a project I designed for a museum in Holland. It's called the Zuiderzee Museum, and it's a museum where you can still see how people 100 years ago lived and how the houses looked back then, what kind of stores they had. So this project is about respecting the things that are already there and traditions and translating them into a new idea. This is ceramics, same as I make my soft ceramics, with traditional Delft blue painting on it and a gold coating. And the furniture piece is made out of tulip wood and ceramic drawers. And each furniture piece consists of the furniture, a piece of ceramic, which is in this case on top, and a textile piece. And on the left side here you see the full range. And on the right side you see my scale models. And you'll see that the scale models almost have the same feeling and looks as the final product. I always spend a lot of time in making scale models, just because I really enjoy it and I like to spend a lot of time in it, but also that if you spend a lot of time in the models, you already get the feeling of how it should be in the end, and you can make a lot of different decisions in there. I like sketching a lot. I've been sketching already since a child. When I was a child, I was really good at drawing, like, for example, the face of a person or perspective, and technically it was perfect. And now I don't do that so much anymore, those type of drawings, because I don't like to draw that precise anymore. I like the much more free drawings, like the ones you see here. Because what I like about sketches, especially if they are a bit free and not perfect, is that you can make many different interpretations. When you have a sketch and you will ask to 10 different people how he or she sees it would look like in real, in 3D, it will probably all look different if you would make it in 3D. And that's the nice thing about sketching by hand, is that it gives still a lot of openness to form your idea. This project is called Cut and Paste. I developed it for a gallery in Rome about 4 years ago now. As I said, I never want to use my own existing methods, and I always try to come up with something challenging and new for myself. I decided this time to not look at the past anymore, to not look in history, because I always like to research history, but on purpose I didn't do it this time, and I only took a blank piece of paper and I started to draw thousands of sketches without any particular thing in mind, just some very free sketches. And from there I started to make scale models, which you see on the left-hand side, and I really in this case, I really designed by making, almost as a sculpture or a painter would do. I would put different layers to each other remove something, put something new again in this skill model. So that's how I kind of formed the design, by just doing and making, and just stacking things on top of each other, making different combinations, and without having a set idea beforehand. And here you see on the left side that it's a kind of stairs with a box with a mirror and a lamp. Well, you can use it as a lamp, but you could also use it as a bookshelf. I mean, anything, for example, can be a bookshelf. A table can be a bookshelf. The ground can be a bookshelf. It's just how you call it yourself. And that's what I actually want to illustrate with this, is that I think logics and non-logics and absurdism is very important, because it creates a big freedom, and there's nobody that tells you that a table should look like this and that it should have those and those parts or elements. So as a designer, in fact, I think you're totally free to come up with things. And the funny thing is, when I made those things, people always like to label things. So somebody would say for that right thing, oh yeah, that looks like a garden cart. And then I said, oh yeah, that's funny, because I didn't have that in mind at all. But for me, everybody is free to give his own interpretations to this series of works. And I found out that it became a big success in the media, probably because it's such a free project, and it's just like in Alice in Wonderland. You can turn everything upside down, you can give your own function to it. The people that bought these pieces were totally free to use it in every kind of way they liked it. And here you see in the same series a clock, which I call vertical clock. The clock hands, they go in vertical direction instead of horizontal. And the funny thing is that people were really intrigued by watching it, and it was really difficult for them to read the time. But it's just a difference of vertical and horizontal, because it's the same clock. It goes it's just 12 hours, and it's not different than a horizontal clock. But somehow, when you change something 90 degrees, it's a totally different perception. On the left side, you see a skill model, and on the right side, the final product. As I said before, with this project, I just started to cut and paste and really using the idea of tinkering. And I found a metal thread, which is often around wine bottles. And I just started to play a bit with it, and then suddenly there was a miniature clock. And this method I scaled up onto one-to-one skill, and there was this clock which came out. And later I made a whole series after this principle in bigger scale. Once I had this small clock, I wanted to make some bigger objects too, such as a kind of chandelier and a huge metal clock. And then it looks as if it's almost a 3D knitting or a 3D sketch, like an endless line. And my intention was to make it look really playful and light and easy. But in the end, the technique is not that easy. Because it needs to have an internal construction in order not to fall down, and it has to be stable and all those kind of things. But I found a way to not show this construction, because in the beginning I had solutions which looked much too technical, and I didn't want that. In general, I like my designs to look light and easy in order to communicate well. Although most of the times my objects are not easy at all to make. This is a series of all different types of clocks, which was called One More Time and shown at Moss Gallery a few years ago in New York. They are all made in different materials, and it was showing that you don't always need to make a completely new or different design. but by the way you treat something, you can also create a challenging series. And on the right-hand side, you see those clumsy scale models again. In Alice in Wonderland, there is always this rabbit running around with a clock in his hand. And I find that very funny, because, yeah, why would a rabbit have a clock in his hand? And it's very absurd, and I all like that. But what I also find interesting is that there is a lot about time in Alice in Wonderland, and it's the same in my works. I don't exactly know why, and at the same time I do. I think it's very important to spend time on things and to not always have too strict deadlines. And also I think it's important to be creative. You need time. To be absolutely creative, you shouldn't be at work, in fact. You should be in a forest or outdoors or somewhere where there is a lot of rest. Because if you have all kind of things around you, you can never get to your true creativity. And actually, I think that every company, in which kind of field, not only design, every big company should have a kind of rule that a few people, or maybe everybody, I don't know, should have a certain amount of time, a percentage of its total time, work time, where you can just play in the idea of a kind of lab or experiment without a specific goal. For example, Philips, which has its origin in Eindhoven, they used to have that rule like about 30 years ago. There were a few technical nerds and they just had, for example, 10 hours a week to just play. And in this time, the CD player is invented and all kind of things. So you can really also prove in history that if you give time to people without restrictions, then you can get very nice solutions. In my studio, we always take a lot of time to take a lunch break, and we also have, for example, table tennis table where people play in the lunch breaks, because we think it's important to play and free in order to come up with new things. I've got a huge workshop of about 1,100 square meters with metal working machines, woodwork machines, plaster, you name it, we have it. I started with a very small workshop with no money, and every time when I earned something, I bought a electrical screwdriver or another tool, and gradually, after 15 years, I built up a whole workshop where I can make almost anything I want. This picture is a picture in Murano. This is this island near Venice where the glass blowing Valhalla is. It's like a mecca of glass blowing. And already the road every morning you take to get to the factory is like a fairy tale to me. It's just a very simple workshop, but it doesn't matter because it's all about the craft of the master blower, which makes fantastic things. As you see here, these are some early sketches of a project. Then I make some kind of technical drawings, because they always ask for it in Italy, in Murano, so I make those technical drawings with the measurements and everything. And then in the end, when I'm there, they say, oh, we don't need it. You just need to draw it on the floor with a chalk. And it goes every time like that. It's just the way they worked already for hundreds of years, and it will never change. So I just adapt to this way of working. This is one of the pieces I made there called Dream. It's a stack of different pieces of glass. In the beginning, when I just started there, they said, this is not possible, that's not possible, we can't do your project. So it was first 2 hours of talking in Italian, and I don't understand Italian. So all of a sudden I said to the guy who was there to translate, can we maybe just start with the most easy part? So we first made the bottle, and that was really good. So I was very enthusiastic. And then when they saw me smiling, they said, maybe we can try this and we can try that. And then suddenly everything was possible. So then we made those pillows out of glass, which is very difficult, but somehow after having a very good communication with them on a personal level, it went really well. And I made a piece called Rest. It's 3 glass pillows with a glass hourglass on top, which is for me the ultimate illustration of rest. An hourglass sticked on a fixed place, never be turning around, is for me the ultimate rest position. This piece is called Love, and this piece is called Think. It's a glass table with mirror with scribbles on there, which don't illustrate real words, but it just illustrates that that when you think, that thinking is very important, and that what happens in the mind can have a beautiful outcome. And in the end, you know, philosophers and philosophies, writers, they can come up with many beautiful and challenging ideas that might even change a law in a country, for example. 2 years ago, I was asked by Saint Louis, a crystal company from France. It's a village which only consists of glass blowers and which has this company to create a new lamp for them. And I was very inspired by the metal molds they had. The molds were to me so impressive. It looked as if they were the queens of the factory. They didn't really show the molds to me because they thought it was not that interesting. It was somewhere far away around the corner. They were only showing the kind of showpieces. But I got really intrigued by that, and I'm going to show you with a movie what the outcome of that was. Oh, thank you. This is another image from Alice in Wonderland. What I like about this image is that, to me, this is really about tinkering, that just of a set of cards, you can make something, you can make characters. And tinkering, in Dutch, we call it vreubelen. And it's actually something which is a bit underestimated. It's something that you do in kindergarten. And then for this lecture, I looked it up, the word vreubelen, on Wikipedia, and I found out that it comes from a Sir called Wilhelm Friedrich Vreubel, who was a guy that made an educational theory, a very important one, and he's the one who invented the word kindergarten. It's a garden of kids for kids, and he said it was very important to be in nature, to have a body movement, and to set up your own activities as a child, and also in further life. So it's funny that I find it really important in the design process, and that it's actually something which is a real theory. Well, this vreubelen is what happened here as well. I've been cutting again with pieces of fabric, and on just a flat surface, I designed a piece of furniture, which is obviously not in the right perspective or anything, but I thought it was interesting to translate it into a metal 3D piece. And I made a whole collection around it with a blown up metal pillow, with still the feeling of the original lace, as in textile. Then I also like things, domestic things, like iron boards and things like that. So I made a whole collection around it, as well as a sewing box cabinet. This cabinet is about 2 meters high, and it opens with a very intelligent system, what you see on the right side, and it becomes about 2 times as big. Then about 4 years ago, I was visited by a very important woman from Hermes, the fashion brand. to see if I was interested to work with them. She came from Paris to visit my studio in Holland. And when she left, she said, this is not the last time that we saw each other, but we will see each other much more in the future. So that was a big honor for me. And because I think it's a fantastic brand with a very high standard of crafts. And actually, they asked me to do something right away for them, which should be finished in 3 months' time. And then I said, I'm very honored, but I'm not going to do it, because this is the first time I work for you, and when I do something, I want to do it good, and I don't want to rush. So I skip this commission. And, well, I think a lot of people would have said, yes, I'll do it, and I will make a way to do it. But I thought it was important to stay truthful to myself. And they really respected that. They said, actually, we're really happy that you say it, because it tells us something about your mentality. And in the end, I got many, many projects from them, and I'm still working a lot for them. Here you see windows that I designed for them as a huge installation with some of their products. These are windows of about 4 or 5 meters wide. And it became such a big success that it has been traveling all around the world, to Japan, to Vancouver, to Dubai, to Spain, I don't know where. And those puppets are all puppets that I've been painting in watercolor and small, and then blown up. And what was nice is that I had been doing a lot of watercoloring as a child, but I kind of lost it. And this project gave me a kind of reason to start up with it again. So even for such a big brand, you can play and you can do something you really like yourself. I designed also some miniature worlds for a traveling exhibition of their watches. Their watches are called La Montre Hermes, and it has been traveling around the world for 3 years. And what was funny, I really don't look at what could sell or whatever, I'm just in the creative part. And it turned out that the watches times as much as without this presentation. So you can see that creativity can also really benefit in a commercial way. This is something I designed. Hard Design, an American furniture company. They asked me and my partner Joost to design a textile collection. And we just started to try some things in the workshop, to spray over wood and to cut pieces of wood and to stick them together. And in the end, it was translated in a full textile series, which you see over here. And since it was inspired by our own workshop, we said, wouldn't it be funny to make the commercial, the marketing pictures in our workshop? And so they did. And also that was a big success, because it was published in Wallpaper magazine and I don't know whatsoever. And this is also something that started a little bit as a joke, but we took it seriously and it worked. This is a gigantic room divider with sketches that I made with oil wax and textile in small, and I photographed that and I had it woven on a jacquard woven machine. Then some things that I'm working on now and interested is about looking what I have, what I did already, and also things that I've thrown away in my own workshop in the dustbin, and I take them out again, and I re-watch them, and I re-look what I can do with it. So this is just a tiny piece of paper with the principle that you use as a child. You double fold it, you start cutting, and a funny pattern comes out. So I found that in a dustbin, and I thought, actually, it's a really nice principle to design something. So I made a series of lamps that came out. A hanging one, a standing one, LED light, and a bigger one. And it was published a few weeks ago in the New York Times magazine. So here you can also see that when you just do something out of fun, something nice can come out. And even a month ago for Christmas, I designed the Christmas facade for Hermes, which is a very big thing for them, and which has go through all the different layers of the company in Paris, through all the different art directors and directors. And it was based on the principle of cutting this simple paper. Of course, in the end, it's also a technical thing, but the base lies in this very simple piece of paper. Thank you.